Okay, good evening, and thank you for your attendance here this evening. I am Deputy Mayor Vicky Mink, and I'll be chairing this public meeting tonight. I'm joined by staff and members of council. I'll introduce. First, we have Councillor Adam Pearson, and we have the Mayor, Olena Hankivsky, myself. We have Councillor Claire, Councillor Todd Atridge, and Councillor Les Andrews. I'd like to begin, as we always do, with a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. And now I would like to read our Indigenous Land Acknowledgement Statement. The municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga-Anishinaabe traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as right holders and stewards of the lands and waters on which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. I'd like to ask, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest from members of council? I'd like to note that none were received in advance. I'm seeing none. Okay, so we are here tonight for a public meeting that is held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. This meeting is a prescribed requirement under the Act and represents only one component of the planning and development process. Please note that no decisions will be made here tonight. The format of today's public meeting is as follows. First, the applicant or the representative will provide an overview of the application and policy framework review. Then municipal staff will provide an overview of the technical review and public consultation. Council members may ask questions of the applicant or staff or provide comments at this time. Finally, members of the public who wish to provide input will be able to do so by coming to the podium. Alternatively, you can also provide input via written submission to planning@porthope.ca. Please note, as the chair, I may call the applicant or staff to provide clarification on matters raised by members of the public. I would also like to note that there are sign-in sheets over here near the entrance. If you want to be notified when a notice of decision is issued, please ensure you fill out the sign-in sheets with your information. It is now time to commence our public meeting for this evening. This is regarding a proposed zoning bylaw amendment application to amend zoning bylaw 20/2010, file number ZB02-2025, submitted by Clark Consulting Services on behalf of the owner, Asunder Trade and Capital, for lands municipally known as 86 John Street within the urban area of the municipality of Port Hope. I'd like to note that council members are not here tonight to express their opinions for or against the proposed changes. The time for that will come when the matter is brought forward for consideration at a future meeting of the Committee of the Whole. So I'm going to ask planning staff to please introduce the speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe Mr. Bob Clark and Mr. Reno Piccini are here to represent the owner.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present this. My name is Bob Clark. Mr. Piccini is also here with me this evening, and he will be making some of the presentation later on in the presentation. I also wanted to introduce William and Ingrid Lauren, who are here, and they are available to answer questions if there are questions later on with respect to the proposal. Now I'll try and see if I can make the slide. Oh, there we are. I think most people are familiar with the location, but we have provided a location map. Obviously, the John Street frontage and the Augusta Street on the side, with the Carlisle Inn at the intersection of John and Augusta. And the subject lands that we're particularly interested in this evening are the lands that are in the to the rear of these and are the elongated portion in the rear of this property. And as you've indicated, Madam Chair, the purpose of the application is for a zoning amendment. The purpose of the use, as we'll describe it, is a permitted use on this property. And what we're seeking are some minor zoning changes in order to accommodate the use as we have designed it. The property, again, this is an aerial of the property, and you can see the Carlisle at the intersection takes a very significant portion of the intersection. But as you can see to the rear, there is an area that we hope to be able to use for purposes of this permanent residential condominium development. Oh, I was just wondering if there was something I should be aware of. Anyway, I think everyone is aware of the property. This is, of course, a view. Well, it's not a very clear view, but it's looking from the Carlisle back towards the property, and we're going to be making use of the low area there. The building proposal, which we'll illustrate in a moment, will actually abut the existing structure, the single tier truck, single story structure, and provide an access through that. But I'll review that later. I think everyone's familiar with the location. This is the concept plan, and in the green is the Carlisle. And as you can see, the bold outline is the footprint of the structure. And the footprint of the residential structure is on the orange land, which will ultimately, we're proposing to sever from the Carlisle lands. And the bold outline there is the footprint of the building. What we are proposing is that there will be two access points. One of them will be between the two buildings, and there will be an area that allow access between the two buildings. There is a building over top of that access, and the other access will be the existing access from John Street. So unlike many developments, this development, both the hotel and restaurant and the condominium residential, will have two access points, which is an advantage from a safety point of view and from an alternative for access point of view. The other interesting aspect is that you can't see it very well on this, but there is a shaded area which indicates the parking that's being proposed. Some of that parking will be at ground level in the proposed building. Others will be to the rear of that building, which is in the longer area where the red arrow ends up and the yellow arrow goes. And what is proposed here is that there will be an agreement between the two properties with respect to access, so that both properties have access, and with respect to parking, so that the parking can be shared. Because at the present time, the Carlisle has a deficiency in parking, and what this will allow is additional parking to be available for the Carlisle on the proposed development. Within the municipal official plan, this area is designated as central commercial, and within that designation, residential development is permitted. So that when we're not seeking an amendment to the official plan, because what we're proposing to do is a permitted use within that official plan. I also acknowledge that there is an area to the rear where there is a slope, and what we are proposing to do is, from a geologic point of view, the building itself will provide stability for that slope so that there will be no issue with respect to the slope as it applies to this property or the adjacent property. Similarly, there are vegetation concerns, but there are no trees to be removed as a result of this proposal. The trees that are there are the trees that are on the adjoining property, and stabilizing the slope will ensure that those trees can continue to exist on that property. We acknowledge that there are heritage issues and concerns with respect to the development proposal. We've had a heritage assessment prepared and it has been reviewed, and we are now in the process of considering the comments that have been made in that heritage assessment. But this is, the subject plans are within the area that's identified as the red area as an area of major intensification. And what we would suggest is that this is an opportunity for intensification, which is completely doable and feasible. We also acknowledge that we're within the heritage designation area, heritage district, and what we are proposing to do is, we feel, consistent with the policies of the heritage designation. This is the John Ontario Queen Street Heritage Conservation Plan, and it illustrates that that the property, not easy to see here, but Walton Street is the green area that goes up there, and the dark area is the area of the heritage district, and our property, we acknowledge, is within that district. And the Carlisle Hotel and Restaurant is a designated heritage building, and we have been careful to consider the impact on that building. With respect to zoning, and that's what we're here to discuss, the zoning bylaw zones this in a commercial 3 zone, which permits the apartment building. It is a downtown commercial zone, and it's the entire property is within that zoning. With respect to zoning compliance, there are several areas in which we are seeking to seek compliance issues, and we acknowledge there is non-compliance. One is lot frontage. The area that has been chosen for the severance for the new residential building is limited by the presence and the existence of the existing structure on the property. So we have a very minor exception required here. I think it's 20, I can't read that very carefully, 28.4, whereas the minimum is 30. So there's a very minor adjustment required in the minimum lot frontage. With respect to the interior side yard, there are side yard requirements, and because of the nature of the building, we will be determining whether or not those side yards, because the side yard dimension is determined by the presence of windows, and we will be looking at that in more detail, but we acknowledge that there will be some difficulty in achieving a 4.5 meter side yard for this building. And finally, with respect to height, we acknowledge that there is a limit. The limit is 14 meters, and our proposal is 17 meters. And what we're proposing is that we acknowledge that the height of the building, the main part of the building, will meet the requirement, but we're seeking an exception to allow an additional height, and Reno will explain how we propose to do that in such a way that it will meet the requirements of the Heritage Act, that we will not have an impact on that. Finally, with respect to parking, as I've indicated, there are parking requirements. We can meet the parking requirements for the residential structure. The existing parking for the hotel and restaurant is currently deficient by 18 parking spaces. And with the additional parking that's being provided, we can actually improve that to a deficiency of 12 spaces. Now, because we're in a downtown area and there is parking available, that the hotel restaurant has been able to work with an 18 parking space deficiency and improving it to 12, it still, in my opinion, will be able to continue. I'm going to turn it over to Reno now. I'll let you go. This is the clicker,
advance
and
it.
it's that arrow that moves it ahead.
Great, thank you.
Okay?
Thank you, Bob. Good evening, everyone. As Bob mentioned, I'm Reno Piccini, the architect who is responsible for the design. I'd like to spend a few minutes describing the site plan just to help with an understanding of the context. So I will move forward to, oops, maybe I'm going the wrong way. Okay. There we are. There's the site plan. Might be difficult to see in this light, but I do have a pointer that I can use, a laser pointer. There we are. Okay, as Bob has mentioned, we're seeking permission for a 5-story standalone residential building that abuts the kitchen annex to the extreme west end of the existing hotel. And I'll point out where that line is. So essentially it
Sorry, can I ask
follows-
you to speak, sorry to interrupt you, right into the microphone? Thank
Yes.
you.
That line, which also corresponds to the severance, is this line here, and that abuts the existing extreme west end of the kitchen annex, which is this 1-story. There's a collection of 1-story additions that have been added over the years, and it abuts that side of the building. And as Bob mentioned, this proposal is dependent upon the consent to sever the property. The condominium apartment building will feature 11 units, ranging from approximately 1,100 square feet to the largest unit, which will be on the 5th floor. That's slated to be approximately 2,850 square feet. And as Bob mentioned, the site essentially remains, access to the site remains unchanged. So residents will have the option to, residents and visitors to the hotel will have the option to park in one of 3 parking areas. The parking along the north property line of the hotel will be reconfigured to a more efficient layout that's perpendicular to the property line. And then there's also open air parking below the 2nd story of the new proposed condominium structure. And then there's additional surface parking north of the condominium building in that sort of elevated plateau area, which will be, the grade will be adjusted there slightly to permit additional parking. And we're also providing a total of 3 wheelchair accessible or barrier-free parking spaces as part of the parking rearrangements. I'll now go to the first rendering. Here we are. So this is a straight-on view to show the comparative height between the proposed condominium structure and the existing hotel building, and you can see how the 3rd floor, the 3 floors of the condominium are purposely designed to match the height of the hotel structure, and there's a strong horizontal line of eave that also picks up on the existing hotel building. The 2nd and 3rd floor units will have European style balconettes. These are these items here on the 2nd and 3rd floor where you have essentially a French door that opens up onto a balconette that's protected with a glazed railing. And then the 4th and 5th floors, which terrace backward approximately 12 feet in depth by the full width of those units, step back in this terraced fashion, and those will be clad it's proposed to be clad in a light blue-gray cladding so as to blend in with the sky and be less intrusive. I'll focus on the proposed condominium building and how it's compatible and complementary to the existing hotel, and there's essentially 5 key points that I want to emphasize here. First of all, the building, the condominium does not intrude unnecessarily into any open space considered important to the setting of the hotel. It's entirely situated at the rear of the Hotel Carlisle, And of course, the hotel's principal facade is oriented to the east, whereas the condominium's principal facade will be oriented to the south. So they're two very different facing buildings, and I think that helps to enforce the fact that the proposed structure is not intruding into any open space important to the hotel. Second point I want to make is the positioning of the proposed condominium apartment does not obscure any of the principal features of the hotel. The hotel's character-defining features such as the projecting eave, the ornate cornice, the brackets over the windows, the other ornamentation, and all of those details are not obscured when approaching the site by the construction of the proposed condominium. Interestingly enough, if you're approaching from the west along Augusta Street, that's the approach that would obscure the hotel, but it would be the rear or west facade that would be obscured, and that facade of the hotel is void of any of those character-defining features I was just describing. So in this way, we feel that the positioning of the proposed condominium apartment doesn't take away from any of those heritage, those valuable heritage details on the Hotel Carlisle. I'll go to the next rendering. This is a pedestrian view from the southwest corner of John and Augusta Street, and it's taken at eye level. The third point I want to make is, excuse me, is how the condominium is respectful of the built form and massing of the hotel. And this view, I think, shows how the three-story brick-clad base, it shows how it matches the three-story Carlisle building, and of course the cornice line is strengthened with the strong horizontal line of the eaves and cornices, and then of course with the fourth and fifth floors stepping back 12 feet successively, and also being stepped in about close to 4 feet on the east and west sides of the building, it helps to diminish the fourth and fifth floors of the proposed building. The massing of the condominium is also purposely designed so as to complement the hotel, in that it consists of two elements divided by a central stair and core, an elevator core, which is the darker brick center section, and both the section on to the west and east of that are those sections. Neither of those sections are wider than the existing hotel building as well, and that's of course in deference to the heritage resource on the property. Fourth point I want to make is the perception of height of the condominium, which is reduced by the natural topography of the site. As you move from east to west, the grade gradually rises, which has the effect of diminishing the height of the building as the ground floor gradually recesses into the hill. And I think this rendering shows that fairly effectively. You can see how the grade does rise as you move from west to east. So this, combined with the upper stepping back of the upper two floors, we believe reduces the perception of height. Now, the other point with regard to height that I want to emphasize is the adjacent tree canopy to the west of the proposed condominium building, which is, as you all know, this portion right here. These trees crown the hill and are significantly higher than what's being proposed. And as we know, trees will soften the edges of a building, and as vegetation always does. The existing trees will actually obscure the view of the proposed condominium when you're approaching from the west, coming down Augusta Street. It'll be effectively screened behind those trees. So again, this is an important factor. And then the final point I wanted to make with regard to the heritage aspects of it is that the south facade of the condominium respects the streetscape that's established by the hotel, and helps to define the urban street edge. And as most of you probably know, it's an important requirement of Port Hope's urban design guidelines. So we feel that's an important feature to make. To sum up, This is an infill project that is connected to an existing servicing infrastructure that's adequate to service the building. It's the opposite of suburban sprawl. It's the kind of infill project that I think the town should be welcoming, and I believe it represents good planning principles. This will bring more people to live in the downtown core, which is a crucial requirement for sustainability and the health of towns and villages and cities, as the residents invigorate the local economy with the exchange of the goods and services that they will need to live in Port Hope. And of course, the project will increase the residential tax base, which is always a benefit as well. The residents will be able to walk to local shops and restaurants throughout the central commercial and heritage districts, and won't rely on cars with respect to staying within the commercial district. There is and it's interesting, there is a precedent of a building similar in height to what we're proposing. However, it's within the Walton Heritage District, and the building I'm referring to is the St. Lawrence Block, which is only 4 stories in height, but because of the height of the building and the magnificent cornice and tablature at the top of the building, it's actually only 0.81 meters lower than what we're proposing here. And that height measurement was taken at the middle of the St. Lawrence Block. So if you actually went to the lower end of the St. Lawrence Block, I believe the St. Lawrence Block would be taller than what we're proposing here. So I just wanted to point that out for context. And I'll just finish up by saying, following our presentation to the Heritage Advisory Committee, their motion agreed that they felt that the proposed residential building does not impair the streetscape, and that it is complementary to the current Hotel Carlisle. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll turn it over to Bob.
Thank you. I'll just close off by offering our opinion that it's certainly my opinion that the residential building is designed to be sympathetic with the existing heritage. Reno has explained that, and the surrounding heritage landscape. The building proposes a surplus of parking and does not require significant zoning exceptions. Excuse me. And the residential building supports the local economy, and as Reno has indicated, provides residential units in the downtown and respects the provincial, county, and municipal planning objectives. So that is our opinion, and we're certainly available to take any questions.
Thank you. Let's turn the lights back on. So thank you very much. So before we move on to our staff presentation, I'll ask council if they have any questions for the presenters. Councillor Less.
I'm not quite sure how you get a surplus of parking.
Good question. The surplus of parking comes, and there's a table, but I won't raise it. The surplus of parking is provided on the lands that are being severed for the residential development, which means that there's additional parking available for the hotel restaurant. And so that's how we end up with a surplus on the proposed development, which means that we take the deficit that the hotel restaurant has of 18 and reduce that deficit to 12. So there are 6 additional parking spaces available for the hotel restaurant that are not required, according to your zoning bylaw, for the residential structure. That's how we get to the surplus.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Todd.
Thank you very much. I've got one question, Bob, about, or maybe Reno, for the, is the west elevation visually the same as the east elevation? I know we don't get to see that side.
No, the west elevation would have windows and some balconies as well.
Sorry, can you come up to the
Sorry,
mic?
yeah. And you'll have to turn it on. I think it's gone off now. There you go. Oh, and it's off again.
Press talk. Okay. Thank you. Uh, The west elevation would have windows and some balconies as well towards the rear of the building.
Okay.
And the size of those windows and openings are dependent upon the distance to the property line and are dictated by the building code. Whereas on the east side of the building, which is right on the property line, the building code does not permit any openings of any kind. So that's the difference between the two.
Okay, thank you. My other question is for staff. The parking agreement that's referenced in the presentation, does it survive beyond the sale of either of these properties or any future development?
Yeah, through the chair. So that's something that we are considering right now. I think the intention is for us to look at best practices of what's been done before, but it's our understanding right now that it would be registered on title and it would be recognized through the zoning bylaw amendment or the site-specific zones. However, as I said, we still need to work through that and confirm those details.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mayor.
Thank you. I'm not a huge fan of parking spots in a downtown core, but you all know that by now. My question is about the actual units themselves. You talked about the range of units starting from smaller to a very large size on the 5th floor. Can you provide us with a little bit more detail about the 11 units that will be in the building?
Hello, my name's Bill. This is my wife Ingrid, my daughter, and my granddaughter. Yeah, in terms of, we haven't done that much work internally on what the units will look like, other than, yeah, sketch out from what we understand of people we've talked to of what the market will bear. But if you don't know if it's going to be 5 or 4 stories, it's hard to do much more than that. But yeah, there's a range, as Reno mentioned, between, I guess it's 1,000 to 2,800.
So I just have a quick follow-up. So if I understand it correctly, you're trying to match the demands or the needs of the community to what will be the eventual design of the units inside. Is that, are you trying to
Yeah,
match that?
yeah, and the way the footprint falls and the constraints to provide parking, all these other things, you know, you've sort of got, yeah, the footprint dictates a lot of the sizes, and then as you move up, and then if you try to step back on the top 2 floors, you get very limitations on the sizes that can go into the various units. So we have lots of flexibility once we understand what the rules are, and I guess that's what we're here to try to get to, a place where we can move forward with finalizing, designs.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Okay, so thank you very much for your presentation. Now I will ask planning staff to please make their presentation and introduce the report.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, members of council. I'm going to provide a presentation just on the high-level overview of the subject property and where we stand in the rezoning application process. So as you all know, subject property is addressed at 86 John Street. The rezoning application is file number ZB02-25. So the subject property is located at the northwest corner of the intersection of Augusta and John Streets. To the north of subject property, the Henry Howard Meredith House, with commercial and mixed-use buildings fronting along John Street exists, with Walden Street further north. To the east of the subject property, the First Baptist Church is on the opposite side of John Street. Memorial Park, Town Hall, and Queen Street are further east. To the south, there's a Canada Post facility, a dentistry office, and established low-density residential neighborhoods. And to the west, there's established low-density residential neighborhoods. So public consultation. So the Planning Act tools we used for public consultation was resident mailouts to all residents within 120 meters of the subject property. There's also an on-site public notice sign posted along the frontage of Augusta Street. A notice was also posted on the municipal website. Notice of complete application was issued and notice of public meeting was issued on May 28th, 2025. And the site sign was posted along Augusta Street on June 3rd, 2025. So as part of the rezoning application, we circulate supporting materials to staff and agencies for commenting. So Aldervale First Nation has requested consultation process and in accordance with their consultation protocol. Parks, Recreation, Culture Division has no objections, but will ask for cash in lieu of parkland. Works in Engineering Department has accepted the draft engineering materials, but further review of these materials would be required at site plan. CNL and Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board has no objection on the rezoning application. The Building Division, Protection Services, County of Northumberland, Bell Canada, Canada Post and Lexicon, we have not received comments to date, but I will note that after the publishing of this agenda, we have received comments from Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority, which is very similar to the comments received by Works and Engineering Department that they're accepting of the draft materials and further review would be required at site plan stage. So the Planning Division provided some general comments on the draft zoning bylaw amendment application. We are recommending 2 site-specific zones rather than the one that has been proposed in the initial submission. We'd also like to see the bicycle parking deficiency addressed. We have requested that the Downtown Port Hope Urban Design Guidelines will be addressed, and we've also acknowledged that the Downtown Urban Design Guidelines relative to architectural details will be upheld at site plan stage. So Mark R. Letourneau and Associates has peer reviewed the submitted heritage impact assessment, and they have provided comments on the submitted document. Peer reviewer has requested reference to the latest provincial policy framework, has stated that it requires an assessment of the potential impact on adjacent protected heritage properties, has recommended confirmation from a geotechnical engineer that the hotel and restaurant would not be damaged, and has requested more visualizations to demonstrate heritage impact, if any. Oops. So next steps. The applicant will address public and agency circulation comments. Staff will then prepare a recommendation report based on policy consistency and conformity and considers all comments received from the public. Recommendation report reviewed at the committee of the whole will decide if the application should proceed to a council meeting for a final decision. In a council meeting, for decision will occur. If approved, a notice of decision giving a appeal period of 20 days would begin. I'll also note that since the publishing of this agenda, we have received about 6 pieces of correspondence that outline their letters of concern. I would like to indicate that although those letters are not on tonight's agenda, staff have received them. They will be provided to the proponent. We will ask the proponent to respond to those concerns, and they will be received by council prior to making a decision on this application. Okay, third-party appeals. So residents' appeal rights for zoning bylaw amendment applications have been removed by the province through Bill 23. This is part of the More Homes Built Faster Act of 2022. And through this, only prescribed specified persons and specified bodies as defined under the Planning Act have appeal rights for zoning bylaw amendment applications within the province of Ontario. So Mr. Clark and Mr. Vicini did a great job outlining the next 4 slides, which are images that have already been shown. So I won't speak to them, but this is the proposed development looking northward, looking northwest from Augusta and John. Proposed severance plan and footprints. And the last one is the site plan, and we can reference these images if we'd like to for discussion purposes as we move forward tonight. And that's about it for me, Madam Chair. If there are any questions from council, I'll be happy to address them.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will ask council if they have any questions. Mayor Elena.
Thank you for that presentation. I just wonder, for the purposes of the general public, if you can elaborate on what is meant by specified persons and specified bodies.
Yes. So those are, it's challenging to say because the list is so long, but generally speaking, public utility groups, the landowner, among other public organizations, agencies are considered specified persons under the Planning Act. That is something I could provide more detail through an email would be best because the list is quite long, but I'm not sure if other staff have any more insight on that, but I can provide that to you.
I actually think a list would be very helpful.
Yes, I can send that to you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Todd.
Thank you. In the staff report, I think it was under the Heritage Impact Assessment, it was noted that there needs to be vibration monitoring for the building next to it. Does that also extend to any of the heritage buildings within the same distance, or like are we doing a radius, or is it simply for the one that's next to it?
So are you referencing the recommendation within the peer review, or is that through the Heritage Impact,
Well,
or
the
I'm
one
sorry,
I'm
the
look-
geotechnical report?
Yeah, the one I'm looking at is in the Heritage Impact, but I think it also shows up in the
Yeah.
peer review.
Yeah. So that was just for the Carlisle Hotel. Specifically, I recall reading that in the report, and the Heritage Impact Assessment said or concluded that a geotechnical professional should confirm the extent of damage, if any, that would occur through.
But it doesn't extend as a radius, it's only to the building beside. If there are other heritage buildings within that radius, does it extend to them?
That is a good point, and that's something that I think we would rely on a geotechnical professional to confirm for us as we proceed.
Any other questions from members of council? Okay, so I have one question, and then I might ask the applicant the follow-up question. The fourth and fifth floors have large terraces and balconies, and could you just remind me about whether we have a bylaw for balconies and if it's any different in the heritage area than it is elsewhere to control what is on those balconies?
So I'm not aware of any specific bylaws to balconies, but that is recognized within our zoning bylaw provisions for balconies. And through a review of the zoning bylaw, there's no concerns with the balconies being there.
Okay, my only reason for questioning is because they are so large that you could have, being in a heritage district, you could have things up there. So just something to consider. And the question that I had that maybe the applicant can answer, if we look at this map again, I'll just turn this off. Those back parking spots immediately behind the building, I believe you said that they were covered, right? So do all the floors go as far back as those immediate parking lots spots, or?
I can elaborate on that with this pointer, probably the easiest way to do it. The rear of the building is right here. So there are a total of 7 parking spaces below what I'm referring to as open air parking. And then these spaces here, where there's another 12 that are just north of the proposed condominium that are surface parking. And then the other 13 are along the north side of the north property line of the hotel.
So above that, those parking spots, is it 4 stories? Do they go all the way up? And is there terraces as
Yes.
well on the
Yeah.
top floor, wrapping all the way around?
Yes, no, the you'd have to see the elevations of the other sides of the building to appreciate the articulation there, but
Oops, sorry, that was me.
but these are the only parking spaces that are actually under the building, these 6 here. So, and as you say, there are 4 stories above that, yes, right.
Okay, any other questions from council? Mayor Elena.
This is back to staff. I know that you had mentioned that there were a number of additional correspondences that were received. I wonder if you can give us a general sense. Are they introducing new concerns or additional concerns from the correspondence we've also already received? And could you summarize just at very high level the kinds of themes that are coming forward in those letters?
Yeah, through the chair, through my review of those letters, it generally does align with the concerns that have been raised or have been outlined within the staff report. Some of them were quite lengthy, so I can't confirm to exact detail, but generally speaking, it did align with what we've outlined in the staff report.
And Councillor Todd?
Thank you. And those will be publicly available. Is that right, Ken?
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, it will be available. Well, I believe we'll attach to a report prior to council making decision on these, on the application.
Thanks. And any last questions from council? Okay, so now I will ask if the applicant wishes to make any further comments before we commence with public submissions.
I will just tell our story. We're from out west. We bought the Carlisle 8 years ago for a bit of a family adventure.
Could you come a little bit closer? I don't think the people in the back can hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, we're from out west. We bought the Carlisle 8 years ago. My daughter Elise runs it for us. We visited back and forth from Calgary, fell in love with Port Hope, the community, the people, the charm, yeah, the character. So 3 years ago, we sold our house in Calgary and moved here to live and enjoy it. We are not developers. We're only been here 8 years. So it'll be a couple of decades before we're accepted as full Port Hopians. But that's what we want to be. We want to be here. We want to live in the building. We want to be a part of the community. We want to walk everywhere. And a lot of the people that we talk to, the people who are interested in being able to live downtown, enjoy Port Hope. And it's important to us, to everybody, that it fits in, that it makes sense. And from my perspective, that whole west side of the Carlisle property, you know, I looked at all kinds of different things to do with it, because it's a stranded asset. There's just very little to do with it unless we rework it somehow. And I looked into it. You know, what does the town need? It doesn't need more commercial space. It doesn't need, it doesn't need a lot of stuff. So what we need is housing. And I think everyone can agree with that. And it's a matter of, is that a good place to put it? It makes sense to us, obviously. That's why we're progressing like we do. But I'll just finish with that and say that, dialogue and discussion is always good. So looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so before we begin submissions from the public, I'd like to note that the staff report outlines changes to the Planning Act that have changed the public's ability to appeal a decision on zoning bylaw amendment applications to the Ontario Land Tribunal, only as was presented. So only the applicant, a specified person as defined by the Planning Act, a public body as defined by the Planning Act, and a registered owner of the land to which the bylaw would apply has the ability to appeal the eventual decisions of the municipality of Port Hope to the Ontario Land Tribunal. This means that residents' appeal rights for the zoning bylaw amendments have been removed by the province. Members of the public may provide comments or questions related to this application tonight or anytime prior to decision being made by council. Please email planning@porthope.ca to provide your comments to staff if you do not provide them tonight. All those who wish to speak to this matter tonight should approach the microphone and clearly state your name and address for the record, please. I also want to remind those of you in attendance, but especially those looking to speak this evening, please ensure that you complete the sign-in sheet near the entrance before you leave. The sheet assists municipal staff as it provides a record of those in attendance and contact information if a notice of decision is requested. And before you come up, I'll just remind you once again to state your full name and your address, and we'll be taking comments now.
bring this down. Good evening, everyone. My name is Heather McGregor, and I live at 73 Pine Street South, right across from the proposed development, the front of it. And I would like to make a few comments about this. I live within the radius of vibration, if you will, from the closest wall of this structure, proposed structure, to my house. It is 29 meters, which works out to 59 feet or something like that. It's very close. So if we're driving pylons in and disturbing the soil and in that slope, I would like to be covered for any damages caused to my property, which is a Century home. And my perspective on the proposed development, I have a ringside seat because I live right there. And I have observed the operations of the Carlisle Hotel and Restaurant since 2019. And I have a 1.5-story Century home. So yes, I have an interest in this development, and I'm declaring my interest up front. But please do not dismiss my comments solely because I have a backyard and I am a neighbor. There is much to be considered because a mid-rise development in this sort of location is unprecedented and will have a long-term effect on the larger community. And it's many heritage properties, because right across the street, which seems to be ignored, is residential one housing. And there are a lot of people who will be affected by the digging, and there will be a lot of digging. The Port Hope Area Initiative, with whom we're all familiar, is planning next year to start working on the road allowances along Augusta, Pine, John, and we are going to be affected by that. Where are these extra trucks and construction vehicles going to be? Are they going to be in the way of the Port Hope Area Initiative trucks and construction vehicles, which are right there? So there's a conflict there. There's a conflict with usage, and that's why we have councils, because we have people who look at these conflicts and try to weigh and balance the competing interests for these various uses. So as a property owner, I am concerned, but I am concerned for other kinds of reasons. I'm concerned for geotechnical reasons. We're on a slope there. This building is going in on a slope, and that slope has water that goes up along it. Along my property, at the foot of the property, there is a seep with bulrushes. So there's water that goes from the higher elevation along Pine to the lower elevation along John, and actually comes down right to here, I think. But there's water there. There's water on the other side where Hillendale is, and that needs to be taken into consideration. If you start digging everything up, are you disturbing these water courses? So that's a concern that I have. I am confused beyond belief with the parking situation. I've read it several times, and it staggers the imagination. It's confusing at best, and I think it needs to be clarified a little bit. The devil is in the details. The I's have to be dotted and the T's have to be crossed, or expensive mistakes can be made with this kind of thing, and we can have problems that will rebound on the town. So that is something that we need to be thinking about. And I know that there are geotechnical studies proposed. I'm all for that. I think there should be a hydrological one too. Vibration, noise, impact on the Carlisle Hotel, and impact on my place and other places that surround it. I'm not the only one. And my backyard is precious to me. It will be precious to the future condo owners should they succeed in this application, because that's what they will be directly looking at, is my mature walnut trees and my sloped hill and beautiful garden. That's what's going to be, their privilege to have a look at. The hotel restaurant already has insufficient parking with 18 parking spaces, and I understand that the property owner is non-compliant with the existing parking bylaws. No big deal. Exceptions are made, apparently. The loading bay will face John or Augusta. The loading bay will not face John or Augusta, as this is prohibited by law. But this will mean that food delivery and dumpster servicing will be conducted right under the nose of prospective owners. Are you not setting up some kind of conflict between the needs and interests of the people who will buy these condos and the people who will patronize the hotel and the restaurant? The people who are in the restaurant and hotel will want to make some noise at weddings, at memorial services, at graduation ceremonies, and all kinds of things that are held there. But this will not be very well received by the condo owners, who will or will not, I still don't understand, have dedicated parking spots. Who is going to buy a condo in Port Hope if you don't have a dedicated parking spot? You need a car where I live to get your groceries. You can walk to a lot of other things if you're fit and willing. If there's no hills, it's great right there, but you need a car to get groceries. Everybody who buys a condo there is going to need a car. And should they be jockeying for a position to get a space with hotel and restaurant owners when there are bigger events on? It's not all the time. When the parking study was done, it was last summer. That last summer was when downtown construction was going on in Port Hope. The town was pretty dead downtown. And so it's totally confusing to me, the parking situation. I think there will be problems with access and egress. And I think there's going to be problems with some of the trees are going to have to come down along the Hillendale property, which I call it, because the arms of the trees, the branches, the limbs go right directly into the condominium. So they're going to have to come down. Not all of them, but just some of them along the perimeter. And that's a loss. And I think that needs to be mentioned. The final thing I want to talk about is the PHAI remediation and the conflict with the trucks. Are the people in this area going to have to wait further for remediation because this condo is going to be given the green light? I know that there is a great appetite for housing. We need housing. Everybody is for housing. And even if this council turns this thing down, it'll be overturned at the provincial level because there is huge appetite for building things better, faster, stronger, or whatever the catchphrase is. Local planners need to carefully consider the many conflicts such a proposal presents and to weigh the potential pros and cons in their decision making very carefully. In sum, my concerns are about site suitability. Is it a suitable site for this condominium? And the need to have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed on the technical front as far as slope, water, soil, noise, vibration, all those studies vis-a-vis potential impacts to both the historic Carlisle and neighboring properties. I'm also concerned with insufficient parking, with density, with the height which exceeds all of the allowed, the standards, proximity to, conflict with existing uses in the neighborhood. And finally, there will be conflicts with planned PHAI activities, which of course is something that we all have to live with in our beautiful Port Hope. Thank you for hearing me. I feel good to have said something. I think a lot of people in Port Hope are pretty tired and worn down by the various things that they contend with. And it was important to me to come here tonight and to share with you my particular perspective on this, which is going to be like this from my place alone. It's not just about me, it's about all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other comments from members of the public? And again, if you can state your name and address.
My name is Jim Ronson. I'm at 37 Pine Street South. I'm not opposed to high-density units downtown. For example, the Thompson Drive site would be perfect for that, as would the Mill Street South, the former firefighters museum lot. They're perfect for that kind of situation. My concern with this building is that it's going from 14 meters to 17 meters and adding 5 stories, higher than anything else in the downtown Heritage District. They're restricted by height for a good reason, because the aesthetics within Port Hope and what attracts people to Port Hope is, and the filmmakers, etc., the tourists, is the uniformity of the height of the buildings and the overall structure of the buildings blending in with one another. So this would be in violation of that, particularly the top two floors, and I'll have more questions about that later. My understanding is that first of all, when I saw the sign, they were going to be apartments. Now I'm hearing the word condominiums. Can there be a clarification on that?
One and the same, apartments that are owned by people, freehold are condominiums.
Okay, so it's essentially a condominium. There'll be no rental units. Correct, okay. And again, it's very vague in terms of what size the units will be. I know that the mayor asked about that and you couldn't give any real specific answers. And I also would like to know on the first 4 floors, how many units that will be, and then on the top 2, how many that will be. You mentioned something like 2,850 square feet. Are there going to be 2 units on top?
Sorry, can I just interrupt? Can you just ask your questions, and then if the applicant wants to come up and
Okay,
answer
I'm
them,
sorry.
just because,
Yep.
is that all the questions that you had, or did you
No, I
want to
have a
ask?
number of other questions as well.
Okay, so maybe you can ask some of your questions, and then we'll invite the applicant if they want to come up and answer. some
Okay,
of
so
the
my
questions.
question is about the units. If, for example, council were to determine that the first 4 floors, which seem to fit in really well with the Carlisle in terms of the color and the height and everything, if the unit were restricted to that level and the other 2 were not included, then I would be perfectly okay with that. And I'm just wondering in my questions, how many units that would include and why the necessity for the 2 other units. We were told by Reno that the units would be blue and gray to go with the sky. And he said that would be the perception, but perception is not reality. We're looking at a building that will be higher than everything else in the area. And I think it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. I'm very concerned about it disturbing the sight lines that surround the Heritage District. And also, what would be the cost of these units? We're obviously not talking about low-cost housing here. We're talking about, I don't know, $1 million for the condos on top 5th and 6th floor. I don't know. I'd like to get a sense of where that's going as well.
So I would just like to remind the public that the question and comment period is for council. So there is no requirement for the applicant to come up to answer questions. But if you would like to answer any of those questions, I will invite you. But I just want to make sure that's clear that this isn't question period to the applicant by the public. This is to council.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to talk about it. The mayor asked as well, and the answer is the same answer. We're not there yet in the sense that, because when you're trying to, if you don't know how many square feet it is, if you don't know how many stories it is, you don't know how many square feet it is, you don't know what the number is, that you're going to divide all of what the dirt's worth, everything it takes to get it to where it is. If you have to divide that by how many square feet, that's going to tell you how much it costs. So we're not there yet because we don't know how tall it's going to be. We don't know how many units it's going to be. The 5th floor and there'll be if there's 5 stories, some of them will be 2 stories, right? Is the idea. So I don't know. I guess I'm trying to understand why you want to know what the units will look like. Because you're talking we can talk after too.
Why I'm asking about the units is again, the purpose of the 2 top floors. Will the number of units be, how many units will be on the first 3 floors?
At the moment, the breakdown is 1 unit on the ground floor, 3 on the 2nd, 3 on the 3rd, 3 on the 4th, and the 4th and 5th actually have 1 unit. That's a 2-story unit, so there'd be a half a unit on the 5th floor and a full unit on the 5th floor. So that's the preliminary way the floor plates are arranged at the moment. But as Bill alluded to, we haven't proceeded with a detailed layout design of these units until we know whether this, what the situation is going to be with respect to height and the zoning constraints that we're seeking relief for. while I'm here, I'd also like to address a couple of the remarks from the previous speaker as well. With regard to vibration and geotechnical constraints. As most people are aware, the Port Hope Area Initiative has been, I believe there's a company that's been hired to take detailed photographs of buildings before construction began on Walton Street. And the reason for doing that, of course, is because they want to record existing conditions so that should someone have an issue with a crack or something that opens up during the course of construction, then there's proof that that was likely caused by the construction activity. Because of I've been practicing architecture for close to 40 years now, and because of the proximity of what we're proposing and the bedrock that is in Port Hope and the distance between where excavation will occur and these adjacent buildings, I don't think there's any concern here. But again, a geotechnical engineer will address these issues when we have a structural engineer on board who will also be working as part of the team. And we have obviously we're going to make every effort to eliminate the possibility of damaging any adjacent structures. And certainly the Hill and Dale is well over 50 meters away from the construction site. So I just wanted to make those points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to remind everybody as well that this is a public meeting regarding the zoning change. And I know there's a lot of interest in the actual design of the building, but that's not what we're discussing or making a decision of tonight. So please express your interests. Those will be recorded by staff as well as by the applicant. And this issue will be coming back to council for further discussion at a later date. So I just want to make sure that that's clear and that we continue on with the meeting in its regular format. So please express your concerns, but we will have further discussion regarding these details at another time as well. And I'd like to ask if anybody else would like to come up and make a comment or ask a question that will be recorded for future reference.
Just another quick question. If the council did not approve the zoning change, then that would reduce the height, correct?
Well, the zoning change is to sever, so the property can be severed. The height is another zoning requirement that would come for further consideration, I believe. Is that correct? Is that what? Go ahead, Desta.
Through the chair, the zoning change. Test. Through the chair. So the proposed zoning change does consider the height proposed by the proponent. So if the application were not approved, the standard commercial 3 current zoning height of, I believe, 14 meters would be the permitted as of right height from a zoning perspective. The property is still within a heritage district, so there's certain heritage permit requirements and site plan requirements that would still be applicable. But from a height perspective, if the zoning if this zoning proposal were not approved, it would impact the potential height of the building if construction were to or if the development proposal were to move forward.
Thank you. That was the point I was trying to make. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Maxwell. I live at 75 Pine Street South. I have a clear view of the Carlisle out of my kitchen window. I can see the development sign. I've lived in this location since 1992. My first comment is about the process. I wrote a letter. I spoke to Ken on Thursday and was under the impression that if I got a letter to him by 3 o'clock, that it would make it to you folks prior to this meeting, so you could give it consideration. So I hand-delivered it to the address in the notification, which was here. Then I found out this was not the correct address, so I hand-delivered it to 5 Mill Street. And then I also sent an email, but I gather it did not make it to you, as did the other letters. I've been advised in this meeting that if I have further comments, that I'm supposed to send them to planning@porthope.ca, so they will get to you, but I'm wondering if they will. I'm just a little bit concerned about the process. In my letter, one of my first comments was that the proponents have had apparently up to 4 years to prepare the documentation that's on the website. There's some of the plans date from 2021. I stopped counting at 170 pages of documentation that is posted on the website, and for the residents to provide a coherent response, a thoughtful response, we're being allowed 3 weeks to get to this meeting, or less than 3 weeks. I know I received my notification on June the 2nd, and then out of my kitchen window, I saw the sign go up on the 3rd. Given that we have, some of us busy lives, I don't think this is adequate notice given the nature of this particular project. I'm not going to go into all the details because hopefully you will get the letter I wrote and you will probably get an addendum to it. They form several concerns, some of which you've heard already. When I look at the height and the, skyline, when I look at the architectural drawing, I believe, and I think this was alluded to earlier, that the base of the 4th floor is virtually the same level as the top of the 3rd floor of the Carlisle Hotel. But then if you look at the dimensions, there's another 30 feet of built height on top of that. Now, I realize they're being offset at different levels, but that's 3 stories. So because it's being built into a hill, you're really getting, what looks like, I think this is an accurate number, roughly 30 or 31 feet higher than the Carlisle. And I just can't imagine that this is not going to have an impact on the skyline, on the view you have down the hill from Pine Street, on the view you have up the hill from Town Hall. I think you're going to see this, and it's going to be especially pronounced in winter because the whole character of the neighborhood changes tremendously as the deciduous trees, and it's predominantly deciduous as the leaves come off. And I concur with prior concerns about the heritage nature. So that's one of the general themes. But I also have concerns about some more mundane issues, such as the load put on existing infrastructure by a development of this nature. The parking has been talked about. I looked at the traffic study, and it indicated that they anticipated 4 additional trips in each rush hour from these multiple, I can't remember how many units we're at now. Is it 11 condo units? So either the people who own those units aren't living here and are just speculating and leaving them empty. They're all extremely retired and never go anywhere. They don't shop. Now, this is the people in the buildings, and I just think that predicting 4 trips is not realistic. I also mentioned in my note about all the other service, Amazon. People if these are luxury condominiums, they're going to have cleaners. There may be healthcare workers. There may be tradespeople. There may be people doing retrofits. Where are they all going to park? Dr. Guy is not going to want them using his parking lot as some visitors to the Carlisle on the weekend currently do. It's just, it is an issue. And seasonality is an issue. If you've lived and watched for years, I watched last year as people could not get up to that first entrance after snowfall, people turning right from John Street, going uphill on Pine, and I guess they didn't have snow tires or 4-wheel drive because they did not make it to the first entrance, the existing entrance to the Carlisle. They ended up sliding sideways and eventually backing into into Dr. Guy's and making a U-turn and going downhill. So the issue of how do you manage this in the winter is real. It's always been a problem, and it's changed as once upon a time there were not stop signs at going uphill on Augusta Street. That was to allow people to take a run at the hill in the winter. Now there are, so people are going slower. There have been issues in the rebuilding. I don't have the dates, and this is all from a rather foggy memory, but Augusta was rebuilt. It had a major rebuild in the late 1990s, I believe. And there were problems after that. There was at least one major sinkhole in the upper part. There still have been sinkholes recently. I think it was last year that there was one addressed at the corner of John and Augusta. So there's also been a known issue with sewer gas since the expansion of the subdivision to the south of Lakeshore Road. When that additional load was added, there was a sewer gas problem affecting, I think, mostly residents near that Pine and Augusta intersection. Somebody told me it was fixed, but I can attest to the fact it's not completely fixed because I've noticed it within the last month. Electrical grid. There's been more power failures in downtown Port Hope in recent years than there were in the past. I've only had one personally since I wrote this note last week, but again, I don't know how. I think there was a mention that Lexicon had not responded, but I don't know how overtaxed this existing infrastructure and how adding this number of units to this location, whether we can cope with that, whether the sewers can cope with that, et cetera, et cetera. There's also existing issues with noise from cooling equipment. It's a lot louder than it used to be on hot days in the summer. And again, I don't know how you would address that with the additional requirement of cooling the condo units. One of my questions was, and again, it may have been addressed, I didn't hear everything that people were saying, but the use of the condo, I don't know what Port Hope's bylaws are and what the condo's bylaws would be regarding Airbnbs, and whether this is, it certainly has happened elsewhere where people have acquired these things and then just use them, absentee landlords, and use them as Airbnbs as a cash flow generator. And this changes the character of a development if that is a permitted use. And it will obviously change the traffic patterns, et cetera, and possibly require policing issues. And I don't know about construction. I realize this is not a zoning thing. One of the questions, I don't know how deep this has to go in order to produce a foundation, but I have not heard a reliable estimate of how long the total construction period would be in a downtown that has already been quite heavily impacted by construction. So I think I'll leave it there, but I obviously have a large number of questions, and I just thank you for your attention to these. Okay.
Thank you very much for your comments and questions. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? And please state your name and address.
Sure. Hi. My name is Eva Lannon. I'm a homeowner at 82 Pine Street. My family and I have been here for 5 years. And actually, I'm just going to add on to Brian's question because he actually had the same question that I had. Can our sewages or infrastructure handle the additional capacity that this development will bring? I'm not clear if there's plans to replace the sewage like we did downtown. We're in a heritage district. I imagine the pipes are probably similar age to the downtown streets. And so I just wonder, is there plans to replace the pipes? And then is there now an additional pressure with this additional unit? Therefore, is there additional costs that the council and us property tax owners will have to pay to cover that? So that's just one concern. And I'm sure in your report, there'll be some sort of estimate or an assessment on that. And then the second question, exactly timelines. And since the dig, there's been no shortage of traffic rerouted through Pine. In a lot of ways, it feels like I'm back in Toronto, just with the number of tractor trailers and cars trying to turn on Pine onto Dorset to Augusta. So if this goes forward, is this a 2-year construction, 3 years? After all the planning, I just don't have a sense of how long that could take and what kind of disruption are we looking at for those of us who live right there. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. And next up. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Olga Quick. I live at 87 Augusta Street, just up the hill from the proposed new development. I'm just going to make a comment that just maybe not everyone is aware of, because we've had our house now for 25 years. When we bought 87 Augusta, the house next door to us was a rooming house, and there were 10 apartments there. People with cars, people coming and going. We bought it knowing that, but there didn't seem to be much of an impact on the infrastructure. So I'm not sure whether adding this building is going to have an impact because it's further down, further down the street or not. So I just wanted to table that for information that there has been apartments on Augusta Street before. And excuse me, I have a throat. And it didn't cause any issues in terms of either comings and goings or noise levels or anything else. So I just wanted to table that.
Thank you very much for that comment. Anyone else have comments or questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comments perhaps don't fit
Sorry,
with exactly.
I know
Bruce
who you are.
Bowden, 6 Baldwin Street. My comments perhaps don't exactly fit within the purview of this committee, and perhaps more they're being directed to the architect. Because I hope you'll take some concern about design as well as about the issue of the planning height. And I think planning height is probably a bit of an issue. Indeed, I'm not sure that stepping back the 5th floor from the 4th is advantageous, but Mr. Piccini is going to become one of the most important architects in this town. We're going to be talking about Mr. Piccini 60 years from now. You're that important. And the reason is that Augusta Street is the special street in this town. And it has 2 zones. There's a zone of lovely houses of mixed variety, of Ontario houses, of Ontario cottages, of Italianate houses, and so forth, going up from Pine Street on up to Sherbourne Street. It also has a public zone. The public zone is dominated by 3 buildings. This building, built by Mr. Austin, a designer from Rochester, who gave his stamp upon this town, both by building this building, by building the building that Queenie's is in, and by building the St. Lawrence Hotel on Walton Street. He created the culture and the atmosphere of Walton Street. The next building, of course, is the Baptist Church, one of the earliest Gothic churches in the province, from one of the most important firms developing the Gothic ethos in the province. We have 2 churches and a Sunday school at St. John's built by that architect. He then proceeded to build Metropolitan United, the Royal Conservatory of Music on Bloor Street, and St. Jarvis Street Baptist Church, several other really important buildings in Toronto. Then we have the Carlisle. Nobody's mentioned it, but it's actually built or designed by perhaps the most important architect in mid-century, 19th century Ontario. And that firm built the first 2 buildings of the University of Toronto, St. James Cathedral, Upper Canada College, and the Carlisle. It's one of 5 branches of the Bank of Upper Canada, a really important edifice in this province because it's collapsed in 1866, both bankrupted several people, including one of the Smiths in this town. It was one of the key factors, in fact, propelling Confederation in 1867. It is the only bank failure, in fact, where customers have actually lost their deposits before we had a national banking system. He built an Italian building. It could have been built on the Renaissance. It's not so much that it's got decoration, it's been referred to by Mr. Piccini. It's an Italian cube. It's emphasizing height. It's not a Georgian building emphasizing breadth as I do the buildings on Walton Street. Its building is unique in this town, done by a really important firm. But then, just beyond it, we have the little railway townhouses that are going to be in the site of it on Augusta Street. 1 story high, very low. So the perspective of height is really important in terms of those buildings, as well as the buildings to the south. This building is a transition building. It's going to link the 2 zones of this town. And therefore, things like perhaps the color of the entranceway, which I don't get, and it doesn't seem to me to be in keeping with some of the other colors that are around it, but nevertheless, there will be good architectural design reasons given by Mr. Piccini for it, I'm sure. But those elements of the design and the height of this building are going to be absolutely critical in the long term for this town.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to make a, okay, I think I see someone coming.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I came to this meeting this evening. I beg your pardon?
Could you state your
Oh, sorry,
name and-
yes. My name is Tim Badgley. I live at 25 John Street. My partner and I have been here since 1992. We also own 2 other properties on John Street. I've listened to people's comments this evening, and I have to say, you know, some of the comments and suggestions of building on, you know, Mill Street or further down, it is nice to say, but these people actually own this piece of property. I think that Port Hope needs housing at every price. It's not necessarily low income housing, but housing is a problem here. Ingrid and Bill, I feel, have done all the right things. They've hired an architect who lives in Port Hope, owns business in Port Hope, and has lived here for a while. And the same with Barbara, his wife. I think from the design standpoint, I think it blends very well with the Carlisle colors, everything else. As for the height of it, if you look at the renderings they've done, the parapet wall that's on the Carlisle is slightly higher than the black line of the 3rd floor of these new proposed condominium units. For anyone who's been in the Carlisle, would notice that on the main floor, the ceilings are 14 feet. If have ever been upstairs in any of the other rooms, the ceilings are between 12 and 14 feet as well. And it's a 3-story building. I think the fact that this is going to be stepped back takes away. So when you look at this building, when you see the renderings, I think it looks like it belongs. And it also is a little bit forward thinking. And Port Hope needs to do that. And I think if you look out the window and you look at our library across there, it has elements of fitting in with the surrounding buildings, but it is a contemporary looking structure. I think what they're going to do with the Carlisle has that same kind of feeling, and that Port Hope isn't just all stagnant and looking old, that it also has this modern, forward-thinking vibe in town. And especially for downtown. We know that businesses the last couple of years have had a rough time with the Main Street construction and that, but everybody has pulled through it and it's continuing again. Port Hope is and should be a very vibrant, lively, and forward-thinking historic town. We shouldn't be going back, we should be going forward. And I think this will be a good addition to the town. And I think that anybody who's interested in buying these is not going to make it an Airbnb. I don't think it's going to be a transient kind of place. And as for the balconies and things like that, I think they will be beautifully maintained. And I think the people who are interested in buying it, whether it is an 1,100 square foot condo or a 2,400 square foot condo, there's a need for that. There's lots of people in town who are living in residences that are 4,000, 5,000, and 6,000 square feet that are older. The people will be looking to downsize, and people who have come from a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot house certainly aren't going to move into an 1,100 square foot house. There's a need for any size of condo. So that's my opinion on what's going on. And as for, as Bruce pointed out, if you drive anywhere in Port Hope, there is a mix of housing. There can be a big mansion and beside it there will be an Ontario cottage, or there will be a gatehouse that's been restored that is perfect harmony for the surroundings. And I think when you go to decide on this, that you should take all of that into consideration. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone else who'd like to speak at this time? Okay, so I just want to remind everybody who did speak tonight to please remember to sign the sheet before you leave, and anyone who would like to be contacted about future decisions, please also sign that sheet as well. So this concludes then the public meeting for tonight. There is nothing more at this time, so the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.